The Wrong Side of the Mountain with Danielle Daw.
Hey everyone, I'm delighted to be here with you today for this The Wrong Side of the Mountain edition of this podcast. I'm French, but I've spent most of my adult life living here in the capital city of Ireland. My story with Dublin began long before I set foot in this country. I had been studying the works of Sean O'Casey for several years before I came here. His work, infused with social realism about working class life, resonated with me for many reasons. You see, I come from a working class background. My parents were part of the migration to Paris in the 1960s from the Morvan, a region officially situated in Burgundy. But it's not exactly the well-off wine-growing region you might imagine when someone says Burgundy. The climate is not favourable to the wine industry, the land is poor, and the people are poor. It's on the wrong side of the mountain. And it wasn't the first time people from this area had been driven to Paris by poverty. This all came flooding back to me as I listened to an old recording of a family sing-song where a relative sang a song I knew well but suddenly heard anew. The theme of the song will ring true to many Irish families.
Allons les Morvandiaux, chantons la Morvandelle.
The song, La Morvandelle, is a celebration of the Morvan region and its inhabitants. It highlights the natural beauty of the area, including its clear waters, green forests, and bounding trout. We could be in Ireland. This song also touches on themes of freedom and resistance, portraying the people from the Morvan as fiercely independent people, but the song also mentions an earlier migration before World War I, when the men would cut the forests and float the wood to Paris, and the women followed the same routes to become wet nurses for rich Parisian families. My great-grandfather floated logs to Paris in his youth and ended up a local carpenter back in his homeland, making coffins after 20th century coal killed the log floating industry. Let's listen to Léon, my great-grandfather.
I became a craftsman, and a good one at that. But unlike most, I never had a horse or an ox to pull my cart. No, I relied on my own 2 feet. So off I went in the spring, walking for miles in my wooden clogs, all the way to Paris and beyond, to haul wood so that people in Paris could be warm. I spent months away from home during the harsh winters, all this to make a living. And those wooden clogs, they were a necessity. They may have been tough on my feet, but they got the job done. I saved enough money to buy some tools and work from home. I used to make coffins, but I never had money to buy a donkey. I just pulled my cart myself. I married Mary Louise and we had 4 children. 3 of them survived.
Noël Renaud, a local historian, studied the demographics of the area at the beginning of the 20th century. I met her at a countryside restaurant.
Is the Morvan a natural stop on the major road axis that connects Paris to Italy, or just a place to grow a pool of labourers for migration to Paris? There is also the story of the wet nurses, but also the story of the Petit Paris. Until the 1970s, public assistance placed hundreds of thousands of children in orphanages in the Morvan. One thinks in particular of Jean Genet, who was a ward. Jean Genet was taken in by a family in Aligny-en-Morvan. He is part of a pattern of enforced migration that affects all poor countries or regions. In 1925, in the Morvan, there were school classes where 85% of the children were from public assistance. The Morvan is only 200 miles or so from Paris. And secondly, Paris had an insatiable need for labour.
Come to think of it, my whole family was part of this economy. My other great-grandmother, Marie-Thérèse, had been left on the steps of a church in Paris and was sent to the Morvan to work in the fields as a child of the public assistance at the age of 7. The whole economy of the Morvan depended on these migrations.
Many men had died during the First World War. Many men and women left the Morvan to feed the needs of Paris. The men to transport wood to Paris, and the women as wet nurses to the children of the growing, prosperous middle classes of the capital city. With so few left in the villages of the Morvan, the stream of orphans coming from the big city were valued as extra hands to help work the land, and the small allowance for taking in the orphans was a welcome source of cash. It was a harsh world, a world of poverty. For example, if we talk about wet nurses, these women who had just given birth and had milk, they left their own children while they had milk to feed their children, to feed the children of the Parisians' bourgeoisie or nobility. There was a price to pay. Infant mortality among the children left behind in the Morvan was high. Behind the big story of the growth of national capitalism centred on a booming capital city was the little noticed tale of the toll taken on a small, little-known region, the Morvan. The people of the Morvan had this role to play in the economic development of the Industrial Revolution of the 18th and 19th centuries, which was an economy of urban progress but not rural progress.
Marie-Louise had 4 children and left for Paris 3 times as a wet nurse. She worked for a wealthy family in an affluent area of Paris, Rue Henri Martin.
The Morvan wet nurse comes from a peasant background. She is beyond poor. If she leaves, it's out of absolute necessity and to earn money destined to her family.
Imagine this, new mothers just after giving birth, entrusting their babies to these women from the Morvan who'd left their own children behind to earn income as a wet nurse. But let's hear it from Marie-Louise herself.
We were dirt poor. Those thatched walls did little to keep out the winter chill. But you know what? It was home. My husband, Leon, he was a real craftsman, carving out coffins with his own 2 hands. Money was tight, and like him, I had to seek our fortune elsewhere. It was so tough leaving behind my homeland, but I did it for my little ones, you see, to give them a chance of a better life away from the hardships we faced. Paris. Now, there's a place that'll turn your head. Spent years there, tending to other people's children, while mine were miles away. The fancy houses, the elegant attire, strolls through lavish gardens. A different universe entirely. Some of those bosses, they were a handful. Demanding, cruel at times. But you know, some of the other girls, they got a taste for the high life and never looked back. I shed my fair share of tears, especially when cradling a child who wasn't mine. I missed my little ones something fierce.
Marie-Louise said she was well treated, but she didn't enjoy it. The bosses took her to the seaside in Brittany once. She was bored. The sea was just water, she'd say.
The bosses treated me well enough. I ate well, I did. But I longed for the familiar faces of my children. Always dressed in the nines I was, representing the house wherever I went, especially when parading around the park with their precious bundles. Sometimes I even felt treated like royalty. One day I fumbled and dropped a handkerchief. Just a simple piece of cloth to most, but not to me. It was a lifeline. Instead of bending down to pick it up like I would have done back home, I was told to stand still. A maid swooped in to do it for me. Talk about feeling like a fish out of water. You know what? They let me keep one particular wide long ribbon. I remember it was tartan, made of silk. While working there, I used to wear it in my hair as part of my uniform. When I finally made it back home, I transformed it into a little dress for my little Suzanne. Paris may have been where I went to wet nurse after my first 3 children, but after losing the 3rd, I couldn't bear the thought of doing it again one more time. Still, with the milk money, we changed the thatched roof to a proper roof.
The lady she fed the children of wrote this about her.
I hereby attest that Marie-Louise Lemaitre has resided with me, initially serving as a wet nurse and subsequently as a dry nurse, from June 17th, 1914 until December 1st, 1915. I'm delighted to acknowledge her tenure. She epitomises honesty and impeccable moral character, exhibiting a gentle demeanour towards the children, fostering a genuine bond with them, and reciprocating their affection. One may entrust them to her care with utmost confidence. Moreover, she exhibits remarkable dexterity in the art of sewing, alongside proficient ironing skills. Reluctantly, I bid her farewell, as I am compelled to engage the services of an Englishwoman, whom I have regrettably kept waiting for several months, albeit unwilling to part with her. I stand prepared to furnish the most exemplary testimonials. Signed, M. Lavolée.
Migration, an impoverished homeland, never far from their thoughts, a rich heritage of music and culture. Maybe it wasn't so strange after all that I was fascinated by Ireland as a young Morvan girl in Paris. If you want to further explore today's theme, be sure to tune in again next week. We'll continue to uncover more insights and shed light on the interconnectedness of some shared societal issues in France and in Ireland. If you have any thoughts, questions, or personal experiences related to poverty and migration, we'd love to hear from you. Until then, stay curious.